Great. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Caitlin Passaretti. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Associate for the Citizens Committee for Children. Thank you so much for joining us for the second event in our series entitled Roadmap to an Equitable Recovery. During each part of this series, we will walk through data and findings from the new 2022 edition of CCC's Keeping Track of New York City's Children data book, highlighting challenges and opportunities for New York families, as well as the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on child and family well-being in New York City. In addition, we will highlight key policy areas we can all mobilize around to ensure the needs of New York's children and families are met so our communities can recover and thrive. Today, we will be discussing how we as a city can better serve our young people and increase opportunity and services for New York's children. We hope you will also join us for part 3 of the series on June 8th, where we will be discussing issues related to economic security for all New York families. If you aren't already registered, we will be posting the information on this upcoming webinar in the chat. For our conversations today, we are first going to hear from my colleague, Maria Drobniak, Senior Research Associate for Data Resources at CCC. Maria was an integral member of the team that developed our 2022 Keeping Track data book, which you should also be able to find a link to in the chat. Maria is going to walk us through some of the data specific to youth services, youth justice, and opportunities for young people in New York City. We are then going to have speakers discuss the youth agenda, as well as hear from a service provider on the importance of providing young people with opportunities and ensuring services are equitable and accessible. We will conclude with some of the key policy areas city leaders should prioritize to help support youth services and justice. In addition to myself, we'll be hearing from Aissata Diallo and Ebube Weme, youth advocates and champions of the youth agenda, as well as Nicole Hamilton, the Director of Community Partnerships at Girls for Gender Equity. You can find their bios in the chat. They are all incredible advocates, and I am beyond excited to have this conversation with them. If we have time at the end, we'll have an opportunity to answer your questions, but either way, we'll be following up with the slides in the recording of this webinar. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to my colleague Maria to discuss keeping track and highlight key considerations for youth justice.
Thank you, Caitlin. And it's really a pleasure to be here and present on some of the key takeaways from the KT data book. As you said, like we spent, me and my colleagues, several months pulling the findings. So it's a real pleasure to be here. So I'll start just with a general overview. Like we all probably know that New York City is a home to 1.7 million children under 18. It is really the largest child population in the nation. And on the top of these 1.7 million children, we have close to 700,000 youth in a city, ages 18 to 24. So when we are discussing youth and youth services, we are actually crossing that age range beyond 18 and really thinking about youth up to age of 24. And the city's child population is incredibly diverse. 1 in 12 was born outside of the United States. Over half of the children have at least one immigrant parent. And children in the city are diverse on so many other levels, such as race and ethnicity, languages they speak, but still they often remain segregated across neighborhoods, across schools, and across all other aspects of their life, many other aspects of their lives. So this has been a driver really for CCC to produce the Keeping Track of New York City's Children data book, which we have done for over past 4 decades. And with the goal to present the data, but really shed light on progress, gaps, and inequities stemming from systemic discrimination, and really to demonstrate the importance of public policy and budget decisions on the lives and well-being of children and families in the city. The data that we analyze for the Keeping Track data book and in general is coming from a dozen of government data sources, such as US Census Bureau data from many city agencies, New York State agencies, and we are very thankful for our collaborations, especially in obtaining the data that are not available on public data portals, and really obtaining them through our team's asks to our colleagues at city agencies, and we included several of those in this Keeping Track data book. So I would like to just say that we are grateful for these collaborations because they are important in really highlighting the trends for children and families in the city. And just focusing for a bit on the content of the book, we really are trying in this book to to offer the most comprehensive analysis of the data prior and during the COVID-19 pandemic. And in each chapter, we spotlight the data to understand both where we come from, where we are, and really to inform where we are heading. And the book provides demographic information about children in a city, but also provides information about children's economic security, about their housing security, about health and mental health opportunities, about educational opportunities and youth that I will be actually highlighting today, and also data in a family and community context, which really entails the civic engagement, community connectedness, safety, built infrastructure, as well as child welfare involvement. And lastly, while throughout the chapters, we provide the data at the community level, from zip codes to school district. We provide citywide data, like with the trends over time. And in the geographic profile section of the book, we provide data by the community district for each of the 59 community districts in the city on a set of key indicators. So these are in the last chapter of the book, and I'll talk about those towards the end of my portion of the presentation. So in the upcoming slides, I will provide more information really about the extraordinary loss and disruptions of family services, and also stressors that families experienced during the pandemic. It's really like thinking about these both and how many, but even I want to say equally important, really to understand how many conditions existed prior to the pandemic, which we have to keep in mind. And even though we identify several areas of progress prior to pandemic, we know from the data from the Household Pulse survey that during the pandemic, for example, 1 in 2 households with children reported difficulty meeting their weekly expenses. 1 in 3 renter households were behind on their payments. And these conditions affected young people's opportunities in profound ways, such as no live contacts with teachers, reported by 1 in 10 households, or symptoms of anxiety and depression reported by 1 in 2 youth ages 18 to 24. We discussed some of these in our previous webinar at length. And now I will focus this presentation on my next section, really on youth opportunities, focusing on services available to youth, such as after-school programs, summer programs, also employment opportunities and challenges, and involvement of youth in the criminal justice system. So I'll start with the after-school program, just like shedding the light on this really essential service for working family. When we think about after-school programs, I feel like in a similar way that we are thinking about childcare for families with children under 5, having access to after-school program is a critical service. And prior to the pandemic, we had around 20% of public school students receiving Department of Youth and Community Development, DYCD's after-school services during school year. And while we are thinking about how many children are getting the services, we also pulled the data on children in poverty by the DOE definition, which is around 70% of all children in the DOE public system, to be thinking about those who are getting services, but also focusing on the other needs and children who might be benefiting of expanded availabilities of after-school programs. I want to note here that DYCD programs are definitely not the only one available to children and families in New York City, but it's definitely the largest provider, the largest program. And here, sorry, I just skip the slide. And here I want to drive our attention just to like where we were prior to pandemic and decline in access to services throughout the pandemic. So we see that DYCD program is comprised of Compass and Sonic, which is more than half of all children are enrolled in these programs, but also in Beacon programs like school-based Beacon programs and NYCHA Cornerstone programs. And prior to pandemic, we had around 235,000, as I said. But then in fiscal year 2021, we had around 136,000 children served. And on this map, I'm just kind of shedding the light on where the children are served in Compass and Sonic by community district. We were able, DYCD was able to share the data with us, and we are very excited to have it in a KT data book, and it will be available on our online database. But it's really showing the enrollment in Compass and Sonic by community district, where we see concentrations really in high-need communities. Like we see it in East New York, Jamaica, East Harlem, Washington Heights, communities in the Bronx. And while thinking where the city is reaching its children and youth, this type of information on a more granular level helps us think where the expansions are needed. Sorry, so my mouse is not cooperating. And another aspect of DYCD programs is really thinking about, as I presented already, it was a school availability of programs, which is on this chart, this gray line. But we knew that even prior to pandemic, summer programs were reaching half of the school year enrollment. And they both declined throughout the pandemic. That's to be expected. And I would say on the bright side, really, we are applauded to the city that in launching the summer rising program that offered services across 760 sites in 2021 to 198,000 students. And it will be offered again in 2022. I apologize, let me just see. And another aspect that is really important are the summer youth employment programs. It typically, as you can see on this chart, it really increased since 2013. Prior to pandemic, around 75,000 youth had access to these programs. While there was a drop throughout the pandemic, and around 35,000 youth received services through the Summer Bridge program that was one with a lot of advocacy from CCC and our partners when the program was supposed completely to be eliminated and the onset of the pandemic. We also see a return to pre-pandemic level in 2021. And while we are also thinking about the reach of summer youth employment program, we are also thinking about the total number of applications for the program, typically around 150. And I know that city is planning the expansion of the program, which my colleague Caitlin will cover on the upcoming slides, but these are definitely things that we would like to see and that we want to see. And alongside thinking about youth unemployment and challenges with employment, we know that there has been a progress in reducing youth and teen unemployment altogether. Like for youth, it fell from 20% in 2013 down to 12% in 2019. However, the youth and teens are segregated within specific workforce industries. From this chart on the right, we can see that around 50% of teens, these dark yellow, like gold bars, around 50% of teens and 35% of youth are employed in restaurants and hospitality and retail industry. And also from the Household Pulse survey data, we know that during the pandemic, especially with the many closures in these same sectors, around 62% of young workers reported a loss of job, particularly youth of color. So we see here that Hispanic and Latina youth, also Black, non-Hispanic youth were more affected compared to the citywide average. And just more broadly, as we are thinking about services that youth need, we also would like to emphasize just this map, like thinking about opportunity youth 16 to 24 years old who are neither in school or not working. This is a distribution by community district. So we see a higher share of opportunity youth in communities in the South Bronx and Central Brooklyn. And it's really more to really shed the light where we have to focus even geographically across the neighborhoods. And this same youth is usually the one that is more involved in the youth justice and the criminal justice system. So it is like another aspect that we are bringing to this conversation. And while we see that number of arrests for children under 16 decreased substantially, I included this chart on reported NYPD interventions in schools that we discussed at the previous webinar, but we do see increase up until pandemic in NYPD interventions in schools, which really should make us think, and it's making us think what other supports children need and youth need in schools to feel supported that are definitely going beyond the NYPD interventions. And on the really good side, I have to say that the progress made, like the progress we see with the raise the age legislation is really important. We see more adolescent offenders that are placed in a family court. We also see that among the arrests, around 75% are removed to the family court, and only 1% are being convicted of felonies and misdemeanor. And also, like thinking about juvenile delinquents and juvenile offenders, while admissions are declining, which is a good trend, we are highlighting in the book that the average length of stay, like in number of days in juvenile detention, has increased from 2019 to 2020, from 17 to 28. And so in sharing these examples of progress and setbacks, we are telling really a story of how to build a more resilient city, which acknowledge the scars of trauma as reminders of what we have been through, and that we are actually a new version of ourselves. At CCC, the new version of New York that we envision is one that invests in families as a key strategy in overcoming the current crisis and allowing every child to be healthy, housed, educated, and safe. And in this report, we intentionally focused on mapping community resources that are important to invest and ensure that all families have access to, and that they can thrive by having access to these services. And this is one of the ways that we are thinking about countering that deficit-based narrative about New York City families and communities. We draw attention to essential community infrastructure, such as banks, grocery stores, healthcare facilities, and parks, to uncover where in the city are the networks that exist and where we need to invest more. And also, in addition to discussing and elaborating on these couple of key assets in this section of the Katie data book, throughout the chapters, you will also see data aggregated by community district. For example, in the education chapter, you have locations of after-school programs by zip code. We saw the enrollment in after-school programs by community district. And in the geographic profiles section, we really, for the first time, included more granular look on different assets. In addition to indicators that we are presenting in a table format, we map the assets, these essential assets for each community district in order to provide a more comprehensive picture of the community. And I'll conclude my portion of the slide just by saying that there is a lot in the book, like we presented just on a section about the children and youth services. But definitely for the first time, I would like to give a plug-in that for the first time, we actually have Keeping Track data book as an interactive digital publication. So you can explore it there. You can go to different chapters. You can download separate geographic profiles for a community of your interest. So it's really going much beyond, way beyond the static PDF, and we are very happy about that. And of course, beyond the data that we present in a Keeping Track data book, there is data.ccc New York with many more indicators on child and family well-being. And with this, I will turn it over to Caitlin. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Maria. I'm so grateful for all of the work that you and our data team have done. So thank you for bringing us through all of that. I'm now very excited to pass the virtual mic to Ebube and Isata, who will be discussing the youth agenda, which is just one of many examples of like what happens when we invest in young people. So I will pass it to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Caitlin. That was a wonderful presentation by Maria, so thank you as well. My name is Ebube Weme. I'm a member of the We the Youth Advisory Youth Council, and I will be joined in making this presentation today by Isata.
Hi, everyone. My name is Isata. I'm a sophomore at James Madison High School.
Thank you, Laura. So hi, everyone. This is our NYC New York City Youth Agenda. We are the future of New York City. We are the youth, and we are the future of New York City, and we the youth are thinking about tomorrow today. So thank you for partnering with us to making the NYC's Youth Agenda, and we're hopeful and we are happy to share this with you, and hopefully you leave here with something. Thank you.
We, the youth of New York City, are eager to work with policymakers to bring about transformation and to demonstrate the power and potential of youth-adult partnerships. Together, we have surveyed thousands of young people about their concerns and priorities for elected officials in New York City. From this data, we have created the NYC Youth Agenda, which we hope will fuel efforts to make NYC the greatest city in the world.
As you can see from the wonderful photo beside our presentation, we have worked collaboratively with adult allies from organizations such as CCC, the Citizens Committee for Children, ICI, CUNY's Intergenerational Change Initiative, WIVO, and the Department of Youth and Community Development, DYCD's, with the Youth Advisory Council, to complete the data for several youth-led initiatives. The ICI Youth Acts Youth Census for 2021 report, the We the Youth and ICI's the New York City Youth Agenda, and the CCC's Voicing Our Future Youth Priorities for 2021.
Our top 5 recommendations for policy leaders in New York City, which are to address youth housing insecurity by preventing homelessness, increasing school and shelter-based resources for students in temporary housing, and expand assistance for college-bound youth who are experiencing homelessness. We hope to also ensure that all NYC youth have sustained access to healthy, affordable food.
We also want to make sure that we address the mental health needs of young people by investing in community-based organizations, social services, and year-round youth programs. We want to promote economic security and mobility for youth through access of youth employment opportunities such as SYP, financial literacy, college preparation, and other life skill development. We also want to finally expand funding, communication, and opportunities to participate in voting, leadership programs, civic engagement organizations, participatory budgeting, and also community boards.
For housing insecurity, our findings were that 40% of youth do not feel hopeful about their ability to afford living in New York City when they grow up. 31% of youth taking the Yay census identified the lack of affordable housing as a problem in their neighborhood. 54% of youth said that affordable housing would make their community better. Over 101, and this is all from ICI's Youth Acts Youth Census from 2021, over 101,000, 1 in 10 New York City students were identified as homeless within the 2020 to 2021 school year. Approximately 28,000 students resided in shelters with an average stay of 520 days. 61% were homeless by the time they graduated high school, and 94% were experiencing homeless in the Black or Latinx community.
I just want to let us know that the beauty of the youth agenda is like we're not just giving you problems, like we're also giving you recommendations and solutions. Like these are backed up with facts that have been performed by ICI's Youth Act Census coming from 2021. Now, some of our recommendations to cancel out these issues with housing are to create truly affordable housing. Create truly affordable housing for the young people. City agencies must work together on a plan to help schools identify families at risk of homelessness and connect them with services and support that make their lives better. We also want to improve outcomes for students in temporary housing, such as access to Wi-Fi, academic support, social, emotional learning, and after-school and summer opportunities. We also want to make sure we are promoting the antennas by ensuring that they have good housing and they have secure students. We make sure that students are secured in whatever shelters they have been placed in. For food justice, some of our findings are 32% of the YES respondents reported that COVID-19 has impacted their access to food. 32% of households received free meals, groceries from school or programs aimed at children, and 10% of youth who took the YES reported going hungry often. Now, this is all, again, from ICI's Youth Act Census. Go ahead.
Our recommendations for food justice are to ensure all NYC youth have sustained access to healthy, affordable food by creating micro food hubs through community gardens and urban farms that involve NYC youth, as pictured down below. Let city-funded youth programs pivot to meet community food needs with flexible funding and support them to develop mutual aid initiatives to address food scarcity, maintain and expand crucial food safety net programs such as hotlines signs, food pantries, and other discounts for youth, and to create community fridges that are also beautiful works of art in areas with high food needs.
When it comes to mental health, go ahead, Asada.
For mental health, our findings were that 83% of youth reported feeling stressed, 69% reported feeling anxious enough to make it hard to participate in their academic, social, or family lives. Only 42% of youth who needed mental health services got them, and NYC has allotted over $425 billion to school safety, yet only 30% of youth said cops made them feel safe.
Coming from everything that's happened with the pandemic and coming from the year 2020, we know how important mental health is. So some of our recommendations for this are to address the mental health needs of young people by investing in community-based organizations, social services, and youth programs by expanding social emotional learning and mental health supports in schools and communities. We also need to redefine safety in schools and communities and ensure that the youth are getting the help that they truly need to make sure that their emotional and mental well-beings are being protected.
For economic mobility, our findings from the ICIA census were that only 24% learned how credit cards work at school, only 19% of youth learned how mortgages work from school, and only 14% learned how to file taxes from school. Less than 50% of youth report receiving extracurricular support for academics and tutoring or career internship and job opportunities. Only 54% of youth reported that they felt prepared to accomplish the next thing they wanted to in their life in terms of personal, academic, or professional development. 20% of respondents said they never learned how to apply for scholarships or financial aid. Over a quarter of youth citywide ages 16 to 19 are unemployed, and some community districts that rate skyrockets to over 50%. About 13% of 16 to 24-year-olds citywide are neither working nor in school. In many low-income neighborhoods in the Bronx and Brooklyn, 1 in 5 youth are neither working nor in school.
Just listening to this percentages are like really shocking. So it's always important to focus on our recommendations in order to cure and make this percentages very much higher. Our recommendations for economic mobility are youth employment. Building upon the mayor's commitment to create 100,000 youth jobs, especially through SYP, this is something I am very sure about, and I know that he said that. And we also want to expand youth-round youth employment opportunities. We want to create financial literacy by making space in the school curriculum so that teachers and or peers can teach life skills, financial literacy, and skills for economic security. We also want college prep. Assist with financial preparation to attend college. That is, provide money to help students apply and pay for application fees for college, scholarships, and other opportunities. Also, life skills. Establish a more relatable and specialized public school curriculum that matches the career and life goals of these young people.
Leadership and civic engagement. Our findings were that 63% of young people are interested in opportunities to impact their cities. Only 33% have opportunities for their views to be heard by those who make decisions about their cities. 97% agree that it's important to vote, yet don't have in-depth voter education or robust registration opportunities. Currently existing opportunities sponsored by the NYC Department of Education and is supported by elected officials are limited and often selective. Sadly, most students are unaware of them as well. Further, key decision-making entitles include few, if any, student representatives. Community education councils, only one non-voting high school senior who lives in the district is appointed by the community superintendent. Panel for educational policy. There are currently no voting positions for students on the most powerful governing body with respect to public education.
Wow. I would just like to read this quote from a teenager from North Queens. The teenager said, "A lot of youth are not taken seriously in school leadership teams. In fact, I urge everyone to explore consent-based governance, assembly by which means an assembly by all people's corporation and active participation and decision making. Some of our recommendations in order to foster and boost leadership and civic engagement is by expanding funding, communication, and opportunities to participate in voting, leadership programs, community and civic engagement organizations, participatory budgeting, community boards, and educational councils. This has implications for voting, leadership programs, community and civic engagement organizations, and participatory budgeting. This is our recommendations in order to help leadership and civic engagement.
Advancing our agenda. Here we have a few of our most recent events starting from 2021. On June 9, 2021, we had a mayoral forum in which a few of the candidates from the NYC mayoral election came to our event about civic participation.
Yes, at this event, we were able to host Paperboy Prince, who was one of the candidates that was running for election, and candidate Art Chang. He was also able to visit this program. So according to us, it was highly successful for young people to be able to invite those people that were actively running for elections and even have them show up with this.
In fall of 2021, the steering committee created the youth agenda with our 5 recommendations that we just presented.
And you can also see me on the right presenting at the youth rally. So that was a fun part of civic engagement.
One of our biggest events was on February 24th, 2022, in which we had a policy breakfast and a rally for the newly elected leaders in the Adams administration. And so far in this spring, we have met with the deputy mayor, the comptroller Brad Lander, school chancellor David Banks, public advocate, the Manhattan Borough president, the New York City Council Youth Services chair member, and the New York City Council Education chair member.
Wow. We've been doing a lot of civic engagement work. So some of our next steps. We want to grow our network of youth advocates. I know from the past year and since the creation of We the Youth, we have had the pleasure of having a lot of wonderful events and partnering with a lot of amazing organizations such as this one, CNC, and the Citizens Committee for Children. And we know that moving forward, there's going to be a lot more partnerships and a lot more other organizations that want to come on board. And that is why we go into our first one. And the next step for us is to co-create policies with public officials who pledge to do so. We don't just want, tongue in cheek and just a sweet mouth. We also want to be able to create action and back up all your words with action. So trust us and best believe that if you tell us, oh, we're going to make this a policy, the youth are going to hold you accountable for whatever you say, and we are going to come after you respectfully. I thought you want to go into the rest of the next steps.
Oh, we hope that together with policymakers, we can make New York City even better for you.
I believe that is our presentation. So thank you all so much for listening to us and giving us this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Abube and Asata. That was incredible. I'm so excited to see where the 2022 takes us. And I really hope to see a lot of those recommendations put in place. So thank you again. We're now shifting, and I'm so excited to introduce Nicole Hamilton. I just put her bio in the chat. Nicole is the Director of Community Partnerships at Girls for Gender Equity and has been an absolute mentor to me and on a personal level. And so I'm very excited for her to be here. So Nicole, I will pass it to you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you for inviting me to participate here. Thank you, Asada and Abube, for that presentation, and Marija for your presentation also. I'm like, I don't have any slides, but you all are tough acts to follow for sure, and just clearly laying out the need for young people to have access to all kinds of programs in this city. And I'll just share my bio, and the chat is super long, but I've worked at GGE, or Girls for Gender Equity, for 12 years now. And the majority of my work has been working with young people as a program director of an after-school program, which is based in 5 schools throughout the boroughs. And in that time of working really closely with schools, but in schools with young people, just learning to fill in the gaps and learning up so much of the needs of young people, and trying to provide programming that was supportive of their school day learning, but also exposing them to something a little bit different in the world of like community organizing and activism and advocacy. And so understanding that young people do need access to a variety of different kinds of opportunities, from opportunities to play and to just like be and to relax and to be with friends and to like do athletics and sports if they choose, or dance and have a good time. And then opportunities to be engaged and to work and to contribute and to brainstorm and to advocate and to lobby, and to do all the things that Asada and Abube just showed us in the word and picture that young people are doing out here in these New York streets. So I think that it is really important to think about the holistic breadth of opportunities that young people need experience and access to, so that it's not just like we're working all the time without a space for joy. I loved how Abube was really excited about, his participation, and said that this part of this act of this day of civic engagement was really fun, and it should be. Fighting hard for the things that we are passionate about and that we believe in should be a joyful struggle, a beautiful struggle, a thing that we do because we are propelled to do it and because we feel called to do it, but also something that is fruitful and fulfills us as people. So I really think it's important for community-based organizations such as Girls for Gender Equity and CCC and other like advocacy orgs to continue to provide space for young people to plug in, whatever that means. And I think that I'll talk a little bit about what I feel like youth service providers, and I'll say I shifted in my role at GGE now to the Director of Community Partnerships, where I have the pleasure of holding space for youth service providers. So people who provide opportunities for young people, whether they are guidance counselors who provide services to young folks in schools, to camp counselors and directors, to SYEP folks, to just after school program directors, all types of, anyone who works with young people has the opportunity to be a part of this space. I understand that like youth programming provides what I like to call a protective barrier for young people. There are so many things that young people could be doing with their time. There are so many places that they could choose to go. So it is an absolute privilege when they show up at our programs for us to have them there, because they could be doing anything else. So for young folks to show up at our programs is a privilege and something that we should not take lightly. But it also is a time for us to be mindful that like the space that we provide for young people in those times can be super helpful or super harmful, depending on how we approach it. And that it's our job to, meet the needs of young people, because youth service provision is not a one-stop shop. So like you go to school and you spend all your time in school, but you don't get everything that you need from school. There are things that you get from your after school program that you don't get from school. And there are things that you get in school that you don't get at your after school program also. There are a lot of places that young people have to kind of curate their own life experience. So I'm going to get this from over here. I'm going to get my play from over here. I'm going to work out with this group and play this basketball or play these sports. I'm going to go plug in here and advocate for the things that I believe in. So thinking about how we also can provide young people with an easier roadmap to do that. How can we as providers work together to combine forces at times so that young people don't have to be all over the place, but they can kind of have a streamlined experience? How do we be in coalition with young people and also with each other to provide them with a more seamless experience? And then thinking about, this meeting of the needs. I think this youth service providers group that we started at GGE really came out of a response to COVID-19. We were in schools, we were working with young people in our office, in our building, and then all of that got shut down. And so this, like, even the words like keeping track of New York City's young people hits home for me, because I know what that feels like to be like literally on the phone, keeping track, trying to find people, trying to make sure that people had access to the things that they needed, that they had groceries, that their families were taken care of, that they had access to COVID testing if they needed it, that they had still had their program that was running, that was a source of income for them. When they were getting their stipends to come into our office and to do programming, we had to figure out how to shift so that we are not taking that money that sustains some of them and their families off the table for them. So really being mindful to understand like the really integral part role that we were playing in their lives during that time, being a healing centered space where they could cry and mourn and grieve the passing of loved ones, where they could be frustrated about the things that they were missing out in school, where they could say, hey, I don't have access to a laptop or a computer. Can you help me so that I can actually participate and get my education? So understanding that, like, you know, you say, oh, I just direct the after school program, or I just run a program for young people. Like, there's no such thing as just. You know, like Caitlin can attest to that. You know, we're in the trenches and really, really rubbing lives and rubbing shoulders and rubbing up against like folks' joys and their hardships. And so it's really important for youth service providers to I don't think it's important for them to understand like they don't understand. We know the role that we play. I think that it's important for the city and our government to understand the importance of the role that we play, to fund us well so that we can provide access to these resources, so that we can do the things that we need to do, so that we also can rest and recharge for ourselves, because this is really hard and challenging and rewarding and fruitful work, but it's a lot. And so we think about like healing centered engagement and thinking about this idea of protective environments and creating protective spaces. And Dr. Sean Ginwright, who, if you're not familiar with him, he's like kind of the king of healing centered everything. And he says, he gives four pointers for like creating healing centered engagement, which is one is build practices that support your own healing and well-being. And oftentimes as like youth service providers, we're kind of like tunnel vision focus on young people, you know, making sure that they have everything and like, oh, my whole house is burning, but are you good? So figuring out how we can be in community together. And oftentimes young people will be like, but Miss Nicole, are you good? You know, like knowing that like they're asking us the question and that we're in community together. We care about them just as much as they care about us. So it's not a one-sided relationship, that it really is a community. But we also have to put our masks on ourselves so that we can then help others too. And then to create opportunities to build relationships, like that exchange of like, but are you good, Ms. Nicole, is the building of a relationship. And oftentimes, you know, it can be met with the response of, don't worry about me, as opposed to the real answer. Actually, I'm really tired. And here's what's going on. And sometimes the best thing you can do to build a relationship with young people as a service provider is just tell your story and share your truth and provide that modeling as a way forward for them to do the same with you, and also sharing their story in an advocacy moment with the world or with the people who need to be a part of their change making. And then creating activities that are intentionally focused on healing. When we are in, I will say like, oh, there's no such thing as a post-COVID anything anymore, you know, and I don't think that healing centered engagement is a COVID thing. It preceded COVID, and it will live on long after this is not a thing. Lord willing, this is not a thing at some point. But, you know, opportunities to engage in healing centered activities means like not just having a circle about talking about things, but like when healing comes, when folks are actively engaged in participating in making change. And that's the fourth point, is to support young people in creating justice in their communities. And that is where the healing lies. And that I go to school every day and there's a metal detector in my school and I don't like it. I don't like how it makes me feel. I don't like the carceral state of my education. So I want to engage in police free schools movement. I want to be actively engaged in changing this thing. And through that active engagement and that civic engagement, healing can be found for us as providers to work alongside of young people making this change, and for young people, like the thrill of victory of putting your hands to do something that is meaningful for you, that's changing your own life and has the potential to change lives for your friends and your brothers and your sisters and your siblings that come behind you and people that you don't even know, is an extremely powerful thing. So when we put infuse healing-centered engagement with change making and with civic engagement, I think we like sweeten the deal a lot. And so there are so many things that young people are participating in. I heard again Abube and Asada talk about police-free schools and about restorative practices and about thinking about participatory budgeting and having opportunities to participate in ways that are real, not be tokenized, not, oh, here, have this seat at this table and don't say anything, but to speak first. And for us as adults and as youth service providers to hold that space for them where they speak first, where we are leveling the power because we, by our just age, hold a certain level of power to be able to take a seat and take a step back and to listen to what young people are saying and what they want to do, especially when we are making change on their behalf. They are working alongside us and allowing us to speak for them at times, and we have to remember that. And finally, I will just say that I'm really inspired by the work that you all are doing and by highlighting the things that we need to know and sharing this data with us because, we think a lot about thoughts and feelings and the way that, we are internalizing this in an emotional way, but the numbers also tell a compelling story too. It's really important to know how the decisions that are being made around what gets funded and what doesn't get funded impact our young people, disproportionately impact young people of color, disproportionately even more so impact girls of color, who are largely responsible for caregiving in their families, their after school check goes to buy groceries a lot of times or help out their siblings or their parents with child rearing. Or even to just pay their own way for things. So it's really important to know that advocacy for increasing youth opportunities means advocacy for supporting our organizations to do this work so that we can be the conduit for this money to throw through us to young people. That is the goal, is that they're actively out here making the change and doing the things. We can get the money and give it to them to keep doing the work. And also to ourselves to have a dinner and sustain our lives, but that it is a everybody wins hopefully situation. So thank you. I have nothing more to add, but thank you for having me here and for allowing me to be a part of this really rich conversation and amazing presentations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I think you left us with so many gems in that conversation, so I really appreciate it. Before we move on to our final section, I just want to uplift another thanks to Aisata, Bube, Nicole, and Maria for sharing data, sharing important and valuable information, and just showing how evident it is that when our city invests in young people, change happens. CCC has a host of priorities working to ensure that every New York child is healthy, housed, educated, and safe. And I want to uplift our priorities that connect with the stories shared today. So Aisata and Abube discussed in the youth agenda that young people want more economic security and mobility through employment opportunities. We also know from the data that 62% of youth lost their jobs during the pandemic, the majority of the job losses impacting young people of color. This directly ties to our priority, calling the city budget to invest more money to expand year-round core youth employment programs, such as Work, Learn, Grow, and Advance and Learn, as well as supporting the mayor's proposal to expand the Summer Youth Employment Program and Summer Rising, which is a summer learning program for K-8 students. But as Nicole brought attention to, it's not enough to simply expand programs. We need to ensure that they are equitable and places of healing. Youth need to be able to have access to transportation. We must ensure programs are responsive to racial and gender disparities. We need to make sure that providers are paid on time and paid a living wage, and that students with special needs can also access such programs. Maria showed the data that after-school programming reached about 20% of the 1 million students in New York City public schools, and we believe it is important to extend this reach to more students. Furthermore, she showed us that there was a 42% decrease in enrollment in the DYCD after-school programming. So providing high-quality, fun, and culturally responsive programming is crucial for youth development and to build community, and all young people deserve access to such programs. Therefore, we have a priority to ensure that year-round and summer employment, as well as after-school programming, are available and accessible to justice-involved youth, youth not enrolled in school or employed, and youth with disabilities. We want youth opportunities for all youth, and for students in foster care, Fair Futures is an essential program that provides mentorship and support. Furthermore, addressing the needs of students in foster care is fundamentally an issue of equity, particularly given the disproportionate representation of Black and Brown students in the foster care system. 20% of students in foster care repeat a grade compared to only 6% of all DOE students. And students in foster care were impacted particularly hard by the closure of schools during the pandemic. In 2021, only 43% of students in foster care graduated from high school in 4 years, which is 38 percentage points lower than students who are not in foster care. We are therefore asking the city budget to baseline $35 million in Fair Future funding to expand services for young people up to the age of 26 and make services available for both foster youth and justice-involved youth. Our third set of priorities focuses on promoting community safety by investing in youth-led and community-rooted initiatives. As Isata and Mbube also mentioned, young people surveyed want our city to address the needs of young people by investing in community-based organizations, social services, and year-round programming. We agree that this is the best avenue to support our communities and to center healing. Unfortunately, the data shows that even though the number of arrests for children under 16 decreased substantially, NYPD interventions in schools have been increasing up until the pandemic. We know that cops do not equate to safety, and so we are demanding that the $450 million for school policing be reallocated into opportunities for young people in schools and communities, such as restorative justice programs or other forms of healing programs. School safety and public safety often mirror each other. So by investing in healing, trauma-informed care, and holistic care, we are investing in a sustainable form of safety. To that end, we must expand investments into the Cure Violence and other community-rooted programs that employ a public health approach to community safety and fund high-quality youth engagement programs and services, as well as comprehensive civil and legal services for young people facing barriers to basic needs and essential services such as housing, public benefits, and employment. It is clear that when we take these tangible steps to move resources to communities and to young people, we see a positive impact. Investing in youth opportunities is essential to building a society focused on healing, joy, and care to create conditions where young people can thrive. We want to thank you so much for joining us today. We have about 5 minutes left, so I'm not sure if we have any Q&A questions at the moment, but we have about a minute to answer any questions if someone wants to put any in the chat before we wrap up. I'm not seeing, can you expand on the public health? Oh, the public health approach to gun violence. Yes, so a public health approach to gun violence really looks at gun violence as an epidemic. And when an epidemic occurs, you need to treat the family and the community members with care and support and provide resources. And so rather than taking a criminalizing approach where we separate people who have caused harm from resources, we really look to invest in how do we create a culture of care that allows for people to have the resources they need in the first place, to be able to get the service they need post-harm, and to ensure that everyone who is impacted by that harm and that ripple effect receive what they need.
And maybe before we jump to any other questions, I just want to make plug on the slide, you see the upcoming webinar in this series is on June 8th at 1 p.m. and we will be discussing economic security for all at that time.
Well, I want to thank again, yes, everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Nicole, Abube, Asata, and Maria. I really could not have done this presentation without you. You're what make New York City great. So I'm so grateful that you were all able to participate and keep doing the work you do, as well as Nicole said, make sure you take time for yourselves as well. We will be following up with everyone with the slides and the recording of today's webinar and conversation. Again, as Maria said, the June 8th is the next webinar. You will find the registration information in the chat. We also have the Keeping Track 2022 edition interactive page, which link is also in the chat. And we also have our CCC virtual rally for New York City's children next week on June 9th. And we would love to see you all there. And finally, if this kind of action is mobilizing you to want to take change, feel free to subscribe to become an e-advocate at the link that is also in the chat. So thank you all so much, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay safe and have a wonderful summer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Caitlin, and thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.